I guess in being able to pace myself, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've really applied in my own life is not trying to do more than I actually can, not trying to be everything to everybody. I guess being comfortable with growing slowly and putting the effort into building scaffolding and structure.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Healthy Business Lab podcast, where we interview amazing allied health practice business owners to learn great insights from them. And today I'm super excited to have somebody that I've known for a number of years now, Jacintha Bell from Lifeworks OT. Welcome to the podcast, Jacintha.
Thanks, Craig. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I'd love for you to share a little bit of your background. And as you touched on there, you're obviously a practice owner yourself and you do work in the OT space. And I'd love for you to sort of share a bit of a background about yourself and your expertise. And I sort of come from this angle of also with that expertise, how have you sort of used that skill set in your life and business as well?
Okay, I'll give it my best shot. So I was a mental health OT, worked in the government for quite a long time and the public health system, and saw a gap about 11 years ago or so. And I also wanted to have a little bit more flexibility around my work schedule. So I started my own business, which was probably a very intrepid thing to do with very little skill set, actually knowing anything about running a business. But I did just from my lounge room, and it was just me to start off with. And then organically, it did grow over time. And my business is really focused on mental health OT and also pain OT and chronic condition OT. So it was very OT focused, but in that sort of realm, I guess, niche area of mental health, pain, chronic conditions. Yeah. And one thing I do remember sort of saying to myself at the time, because I knew I didn't really know very much about running a business, was, look, I'm just going to be open to whatever comes across my, whatever opportunities arise, I'm just going to be open to them. Didn't mean I was going to necessarily do everything, but at least went down the pathway of each thing that came up a little way to see whether it was something that would be helpful to me or would be something that I could expand or grow. That was really a good, in hindsight now, I look back and I go, that was a really good way to approach it because I didn't know what I didn't know and I needed to look for opportunities to learn and grow.
Love that. That's so good. A couple of big sort of things that I'm taking away, and we'll delve deeper on each of those. I want to definitely come back to what you just sort of talking about there of exploring little bits of pieces. And again, it's obviously you use the word experiments a bunch as well. So we'll dig into a few of those because I'm sure there's plenty of insights and learnings that our listeners can get from that. But I also just want to circle back from your focus on mental health, the pain, the chronic sort of health idea. And I'm always very conscious of, as a business owner, we need to look after ourselves. And knowing myself of when I'm in a good mental space and pain, I've got a few things going on with the body. And when I'm have those pain, I've been working through a bunch of that myself recently. I know the impact that then had on running a business as well. So I'd love for you to sort of share a little bit around how you work and how you focus on these sorts of areas. And I guess that relation to business owners that are out there that maybe OTs themselves or others in the allied health space that sometimes we don't practice what we preach. I know I do that on the consulting side sometimes. Some of those little reminders of how people can use the knowledge and especially your expertise into having them set up to be working at as optimal level as they can be as a business owner.
Yeah, obviously, like yourself, I've had to apply lots of my skills to myself. And yeah, it's been quite helpful to have that background, I guess, in being able to pace myself. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've really applied in my own life is not trying to do more than I actually can, not trying to be everything to everybody. I guess being comfortable with growing slowly and putting the effort into building scaffolding and structure so that I'm not doing a sort of what I would call in my profession, a boom and bust kind of approach, which is where you have one day you feel good, you go go, right, I'm going to launch all these new things and start all these new projects, and then you burn yourself
3
out.
days later, you burn it.
3 days later, you're like on your couch,
You're on the
can't
floor,
move, can't talk to anybody. So trying to look at what's actually sustainable for me to do. And it's not always what you want to be able to do. And when you first start out, you are everything. You know, you are doing your marketing and you're doing your
admin. You're from the lounge room. That's what you started off back in the day, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. You're doing every single part of it. So definitely being able to pace yourself and take it slowly. I think probably focusing on building one aspect at a time and prioritizing what that is. And that's certainly how we would apply my skills in my work as well with my clients. And then probably something came up recently that really prompted me to think about, as I've grown and I've had more people that I've been managing, and a lot more of my role has transitioned into business strategy and managing people, is that especially in our profession, which is a helping profession, where you want to be able to help people problem solve and deliver answers to problems that people have, is that you can actually create a rod for your own back if you're the person that everybody comes to all the time to answer, to solve all the issues that come up. It limits the business to then what your time availability is. And it's the same in my work with my clients. So we try and help people become independent in being able to self-manage their health and their conditions in their life. And it's the same really as a business owner. I've got to the point where I really want to focus on ensuring that the people in my business are able to self-manage to a degree. So I'm not the person who essentially I become a little bit obsolete almost.
If we make ourselves out of a job in some ways, that's not a bad thing. I think it comes to that idea of working on the business rather than in the business. When people get to that phase and that stage.
That's exactly what we want to do for our clients, is get them to a point where they don't need us anymore and they can go out confidently and live their life, and they've now got the skills to be able to do that. And that's exactly what we want for them too.
I love that. And again, if you think of that idea that you just sort of coined there, that self-management idea from an individual to a team member to the owner, if we can do that, and at the end of the day, you're kind of modeling that across all those different areas, but it still comes back to that same core sentiment. And if we're doing that, it's a nice little, come back to another word you used before, the structure and the scaffolding. They're sort of just building these lovely layers upon layers that at the end of the day builds up the capacity all around.
Yeah, and like you said, it is a bit of an experiment. You don't know what's going to work. And I think some of the skill comes in trying things out and then making a decision when if they're not working. Yeah.
Over the years, again, you're in business 11 odd years and going from the one person shopper through to having 20 odd team members or whatever the numbers are currently at the moment. But yeah, I'd love to hear some of those paths you went down, some of the ones that work that you're still doing, even though you might be evolving them, but even some of the ones that helped you sort of course correct or tweak or change. Dig deeper on a few of those.
Sure. A couple of things that stand out, probably around recruitment, marketing and finance would be probably 3 areas which I didn't know anything about really. I'd done recruitment in the health department, which is a very onerous process.
It's a big process. I've been there myself. On the finance side, it's, it's painful.
Yeah, it is. It's painful. And so I think, first of all, probably one of the things I did do when I got to a point where I thought, I need to be responsible for other people now. I need to make sure that I'm doing all the right things. My governance is good. Is that I did engage with a business coach, someone who was specific to allied health, who knew our industry well. And I did try out a few, and I found one that I felt like I could relate to really well. And that was a big help in terms of, I guess, some of the overall concepts and changing my mindset from being a clinician to being a business owner and doing what's necessary for the business as opposed to just focusing on my clients. So that was probably one big thing that I did. And I continue to engage in various different types of business coaching as I need it, usually one at a time, and focusing perhaps on different aspects of the business.
Coming back to your boom or bust idea as well of, hey, just having a component, which again, I know it's something that I've done in the past myself, where it's like I've engaged a few different people at the same time and I'm trying to do all the different coaching components, but I'm, again, it's very similar to you at the moment. It's that notion of going, well, let's have one for very core thing. Let's focus in on that and get the support in that area.
Yes.
Get that nailed down, then move on to the next area.
That's right. And then you can really focus your attention on it in a way that it's too hard to do. If you're going in all different directions at once, it's quite a challenge. So that's one thing I did. With recruitment, I was a bit lucky in the beginning. I actually wasn't even trying to recruit. I had people approaching me, and they were people I'd already worked with and, really valued them as a colleague and already knew they had a wonderful work ethic and similar values. So that was a bit lucky. It was beginner's luck.
I think it's an interesting topic because I just recorded a recent episode as well where that person talked about the same thing, that I didn't necessarily need to recruit. And for me, I actually don't think it's luck. It's in that notion of you position yourself as somebody in the space in the field that was doing some cool things, and you built great relationships, which actually enabled that to happen. That people went, work with this person. And so I would suggest that it wasn't actually luck, but again, it was from a whole lot of work that you'd put in over the time preceding that to do that.
I'd say, well, yes, in hindsight, that's true. And there's probably some unconscious marketing and branding that was occurring that wasn't necessarily setting out to do that. But I was networking a lot with people.
No, I think that's an interesting thing. So I think that interesting takeaway is that you're just sharing that. It's like, I was doing a bunch of networking at the time. I think that's cool. Sometimes we do feel, I've done lots of networking in the past, and you're kind of like, I'm doing this networking, these conversations, but not really going anywhere. But then all of a sudden, 6 months down the track or 5 years down the track, something goes boom, boom, boom. And it will actually happen because of one or two conversations I might have had all that time ago.
That's right.
I think that's an interesting one for listeners to sort of really, lean into, is that all conversations matter. And it does speak to a personal brand of sorts. Again, it may not be a direct intentional thing, but if we're actually conscious of it, it's like, okay, I am building something in this space, whether I'm a team member or whatever it is, or a business owner, it's always still building. Yeah, cool.
Yes, that's true. And then there was a point where I did take people on board that at some point went, this is actually not working. And that was a big learning experience for me and the rest of our practice, because we did invest time and resources into getting new people started. And I guess we need to learn how to recruit people that are better aligned with our values. And that is actually the core factor that is required, and we're still not perfect at it. You can't always know that you get it right. But through my business coaching, one of the things I learned was hire slow, fire fast. So not necessarily firing people left, right and centre, but just basically this concept that don't ever hire because you're desperate, which we have now moved into that zone of going, okay, no, we take our time. We don't feel pressured to take someone on if they don't meet our criteria. And by criteria, I include gut instincts as well. So people are pretty attuned actually to sort of seeing whether someone is a good fit in our value system, and going through a structured recruitment process where it is helpful. We do a phone interview first, and then we invite people in for a face-to-face interview, and then we do look at their referees, and we do actually follow through all those things. And I think it helps for the person too, to ensure that it's a right fit for them, because we want it to be, obviously.
Two-way street at the end of the day.
Exactly.
They're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them in the modern day.
Yeah. And we really want to take on board people who are very passionate about the work that we do, particularly. That really influences how we would consider people for a role. And then, look, when people have started, we do give lots of support, and usually within the first 3 months, we can get to a point. And usually the person has also got to a point where they've decided whether this is for them or it's not. And at that point, we try to then encourage people to look elsewhere if it's not for them, because there's no point in, as helping professionals, we do have struggle a little bit with this concept of we want to boost people up and support them to be the best that they can be and put in place whatever scaffolding they need in order to get to that point. And we always have hope that people can achieve that. But I think what we've learned to do a lot better is to go, actually, it's okay for someone to be in a position where they're not actually a good fit. And it's actually better for them and for us that we let that go, have a natural attrition, and rather than trying to continue to prop someone up in a role that perhaps they're not feeling comfortable in, it doesn't do us well to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that. And I'll come back to a comment you made a couple of times, which is, very pertinent to helping professionals. And that idea of we're actually helping somebody by not having them stay in somewhere that's not going to be a fit for them long term. And we're going to actually help them, and shifting got the right words in front of you, but it's that way of being able to tweak a perspective on what is still helping. And that the common thing is giving somebody a job is helping, but there's also giving somebody the not ideal job isn't actually helping.
It's not
so
helping.
Actually leaning back into that idea, which if you actually go back to that grounded space of as helping professionals, it's what we do. I love that you've sort of referred to that a few times here. So it's great. And any other couple of experiments there? You talk about the recruiting, your marketing, and your
marketing, again, things that helping professionals in general are pretty uncomfortable with selling themselves in any way, shape or form. A very uncomfortable space. So part of it is the mindset shift, that we're not actually selling ourselves. We're educating people about what we do, because how do people find us if they don't know we exist? Yeah, obviously did some through business coaching, did some learning around marketing and also being ethical, marketing ethically and in accordance with all the rules that we have around marketing health practices in Australia. But also trialled a few different things, trialled an offshore person for our digital marketing. I'd say that was not really successful for us. And the reason being is that none of us really knew what the heck we were doing. We actually needed someone to tell us what needs to happen, and that person needed us to tell them what they need to do. So that there was no leader in that.
I love that. Having a leader in the space is something that is super important, and knowing where you're coming from there. I haven't tried the offshore for the marketing. I've got some support in that. But right now, it's this idea of we're going to look to do some lunch and learns and some workshops and those sorts of things. But it's kind of like right now, who knows what and what level to actually be able to get the outcome. And it's like, I've actually got to put more framework around this to begin with. Otherwise, everybody's just running around without any real clues centered back to what are we actually doing here? And I love your comment right at the end there. It's like somebody needs to be the leader. Initially, it usually needs to be the business owner, but then it's business owner finds the right other person to do that. So, so how is that gone? Has that experiment evolved?
Yes, well, that was really, I would call that throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks in that arrangement. And we did that for a year, and we went that this is definitely not working. We need to look for another arrangement. Then we have engaged a digital marketing service that still needs some input from us, obviously, because I did learn from one of my business coaching that you never want to give over control of your marketing entirely to an external provider, because we want to always be certain that what is being marketed is actually what we are doing. Yes, it's got to really follow our values and our brand. But we did find an agency that were skilled in allied health, understood Australian regulations, and knew more about what they could give us more direction about what needed to be done. And they could also do the technical aspects. So far, and that's what we're working with at the moment, so far that is working. And I think perhaps the next layer to that might be engaging a consultant of some sort who is actually looking at market research and a little bit more deep dive strategy at a higher level of what is going to work for us. Because obviously that's digital marketing that this other agency is doing. So things like website, social media, email, newsletters, etc. But there is a lot of other marketing that we do as a business, right down to our reports are marketing, because when you're writing a report and sending it to a specialist, that's telling them how you do your work, and that does lead to sometimes more work from that person.
I love that thought process. I just probably want to highlight there this notion of reports marketing, the quality of them. I just saw in one of the groups that I'm in commentary around reports that have been sent out. You could tell that they had a big base of AI in them, and obviously there's regulations around that as well. But even if we're still ticking all those boxes, if we're not putting our own component on it, some things can be obviously not fully from a person, or again, the message doesn't feel right. That 100% speaks to marketing, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. That's kind of where that's at. So I would say we're still learning. And I would say that marketing is not just external, that we actually have to do marketing, you might call it marketing communications internally with your own team to ensure that everybody's on the same page, that everyone's on board with whatever changes are happening, which is constant. I mean, change is just constant. It's the only thing that is constant is change. Yeah. And so managing that change regularly, checking in with people, keeping sure everyone's abreast of things and feeling like they have some ownership over what changes are occurring is really important.
Well, I appreciate those shares on the marketing, and you also touched upon the finance as well, which I love to talk about. So we have to sort of touch base on that. Absolutely. And obviously I'm aware of some of your experiments in that space as well. I'd love for you to share your continual evolution and growth, and even what you talked about there, you're always learning, you're always growing, you're always evolving in each of those things. On the finance side, how have you done?
Yeah, so the finance side, I would say that's probably the area I struggled the most with as a budding business owner. I had absolutely no strategy when I started. And having been a government employee for a long time, it was managing finances was pretty, apart from your household kind of stuff. Usually you got a tax return at the end of the year. It was pretty minimal.
I had enough money to pay the bills.
That's right. It was pretty minor involvement. And despite having been fairly good at maths at school, I have to say that spreadsheets just absolutely look like gobbledygook to me. And honestly, they still do, even though I've tried a lot to learn them. I think it's just must be maybe you have to do a whole accounting degree or something for that to actually start to make sense. I know plenty of people
that have done those. It's still question mark their understanding of
spreadsheets, profit and loss and balance sheets. I feel like I've learned a bit more. They look more familiar to me than they did when I started, but I still find it a little bit of a challenge. So I did have an accountant to start at the start who was just my accountant that did my previous tax returns, etc. And that was a good starting person. But there was a point where I went, I actually need a bit more knowledge. I moved to an accountant who specialised in health practices. And again, that helped in my development. I gradually understood more and more, and they helped a bit with the company structure, etc. So that was really good and very helpful. And I did at points meet monthly with the accountant to try and facilitate my learning. But I knew I was really missing. I mean, honestly, my problem was that what the accountant and the way that the accountant looks at things is very different from how I look at things. And I just could never switch over to that perspective. And so when he was talking to me about the money, I would look at it and go, but where is that money? Like, it's not in the bank. Like, I can't, it feels so foreign to me. It's like, it's imaginary money, really. To me, in my head, it's not really real. And I was kind of dealing with the day-to-day issues of cash flow and wanting to make sure I kept enough funds in the bank to pay for the costs that were coming up. And I just really couldn't make sense of the way in which accountants work. And look, my long-suffering accountant, he did his best for sure to try and explain it to me and help me to learn, but I just really couldn't. And I knew when got to the point where I was flogging a dead horse, I was like, this is
the same questions over and over again, not getting the answers that help you progress, which again, you've shown a consistent process of wanting to learn, needing to get to a certain point of that. And so,
And so I got to this point where I actually, maybe it came up through my other business coaching. Someone recommended a Profit First, which I'd never heard of before. And I went, I'll check that out. So I got the audiobook because that's what I do, try and do my learning when I'm going for a walk or something. There's not a lot of extra time to do all of that. And to be honest with you, it just made sense to me. And it really talked to me as someone who was like, I just don't understand these balance sheets and profit and loss statements when it doesn't actually reflect how much money I have. And so that was really eye-opening to me. And I thought, great. Well, now I need to see how I can implement this system because I feel like that could work for me. I did ask my accountant about it. he said, look, it's not really something he works with. He doesn't really know much about it. So he suggested I perhaps look for someone else. And I did look around. There's a few people in Australia who work with that system. I came across yourself, Craig, I think of Profit First Professionals.
Yeah.
That was. And I was particularly drawn to you, Craig, because again, you had skill set that was particular to my industry. And I do find that over the time that I've been looking for guidance and advice, I find if someone has actually got a skill set in my industry, it does make a big difference. For example, marketing experts who don't know about the health industry regulations can be completely barking up the wrong tree in terms of recommending you get testimonials and things that are not possible. So that was our first introduction. And I have to say, Craig, that was a game changer for me, really, in being able to finally understand my finances in a way that made sense to me and meant that I could manage my cash flow and understand what I needed to do. That peace of mind of knowing that I have got funds aside for all the costs that I need to ensure I'm paying. My payroll, my tax obligations, my superannuation, all the things that I have to make sure I've paid. And then trying to focus on making sure there's some left over for me.
Which again, obviously, as you know, we like to flip that a little bit and make sure there's some there for yourself as
that's right.
the owner, and obviously make sure that we work sustainably, which again, if you think full circle to what you've talked about here, where you're talking it right at the top of the discussion about sustainability, building the layers in, building all these things, and what you've done is exactly the same in the finance space, which has been lovely to hear these sort of three main experiments that you've done that in each of them, and you really highlighted that methodical, so to speak, a consistent approach to just chipping away at it and coming from that financial side of being able to say, well, if I'm going around in circles here, I need to find the next little layer, the thing that's going to work for me. And obviously, as you've alluded to, we find the Profit First methodology helps a lot of people that have that similar sort of challenge, or the accountants just do the accounting and they don't really know how to speak the language of a business owner because they're stuck in accounting talk and the like. So that's great to get that feedback and the insights of how that's evolved for you. And again, it's been brilliant being a part of that story with you and seeing what you've done and where you've got to. And we obviously talk about financial brain care here. As you were talking there, I was excited because you could just hear that sort of permeating through what you've talked about. And to sort of round out our chat today and this idea of sustainability and what you've created in the business, we want more business owners and allied health practices being like yourself, sustainable, in great businesses, great teams, so that they can have the great outcomes for their clientele. I'd love for you to sort of share one or two transformations, your impact on the clients that you've had. Again, you don't need to obviously give specifics, but just that general, any stories that have stuck in your mind that go, this is why I do what I do and why we've built something like we've built that's lovely, sustainable, for having even more impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I just want to touch on a point you made there about sustainability, which is, I think, again, a mindset thing for health practitioners, is that making money is almost a bit of a dirty word. And I know I had to change my mindset around that. Actually, if you can't get a reasonable income out of your work, then you can't continue to maintain that. It's not sustainable. And that as a private practice, you actually have obligations to make a profit. If you are, it doesn't have to be a huge profit, but it has to be a profit, because otherwise you're essentially insolvent. And that's no way to be. And you're right. By being able to understand that you have to be financially sustainable, that allows you to continue to help people, which you just cannot do any other way. There's no other way about it. You cannot get away without money being a part of the factors and the conversation that you have. Yeah, I myself could probably at one time, if I was working full time and helping clients, I could help 30 people at one time, and we are helping 500 to 600 people at any one time, which is, that to me is just mind-boggling, that on my own I can do so little, really, have such little impact. But with this wonderful team of people, we can have this enormous impact. And again, going back to what I said at the beginning, our goal is not for people to keep coming to see us. Our goal is for people to come see us, gain the skills and supports they need, and then go off being independently self-managing, contributing, productive human beings in society. So I feel like the benefits of that, many different layers. In terms of the financial contributions to society, I mean, yes, people are going back to work. People are not requiring as much funded support as they might have needed previously. And one particular example I could give was, and I'm just picking one out of many, but was a lady lovely lady, mother, a veteran. And actually I did all my sessions with her remotely over video conference, because she lived in a different state to me. And she had a really debilitating chronic pain condition and had lots of input from multiple different practitioners. She'd had lots of invasive procedures, couldn't work, was very limited in what she could do. And really by just teaching her some strategies for being able to self-manage her pain, recognise her own patterns and habits and routines, and how tweaking those and making small changes could actually have a better outcome for her. And yeah, by the end, she was able to run. She was back at work and she was managing her family and got to a point where she didn't need to see me anymore. She was happy to go on and live her life. And that was a great feeling for me. And I know it was a great feeling for her too, to feel confident in that. Yeah.
That is pure gold. And I've had sort of constant shimmering goosebumps coming over me over the sort of last 5 minutes as you shared that transformation as 1 in 500 to 600 that you're currently working with. But again, there's multiple times that from this idea of being able to get people to be able to self-manage and tying that into the impact and the contribution to society at large of the ripple effect of that those people, and the example that you've just given there, that person then being able to support their family better, support the workplace better wherever they're working. The flow on impacts of that is just, it's mind-boggling that. And I really appreciate you really sort of drawing that back to the idea of you as one person. You could do that for 30 people, which is great. And that's nothing sneeze at itself. That is great. But then being able to build something that is sustainable, and your approach to doing things and helping team members grow and clients grow and be able to have something more in what you want to do and achieve is just absolutely brilliant. And I thank you for the contributions that you've given to your communities and what you've shared on this podcast as well. It's just so inspiring to hear stories like yours. And to sort of wrap up, I'd love for you to be able to share if people want to reach out and connect. And going back to that networking idea that we were talking at the start of the day, there's so many things that can happen from networking and ripple effects, and that you've even shared with us today. Where's the best place for people to find you?
Probably easiest place is through our website, which is www.lifeworksot.com.au. And then you can find all our other contact information there.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll obviously include that link for the website and some of your other links as well in the show notes so people will be able to reach you there. But I'm going to take a breath. There's just so many insights. I've got pages full of notes here, and that's even after knowing you for a number of years now. So there's so many great insights there. But once again, thank you, Jacintha, for sharing all those golden nuggets today.
Oh, you're welcome, Craig. Thanks for the opportunity, and thank you for your help in my business. Really appreciate that.
I really appreciate you sharing that as well. And so that's a wrap from the Healthy Business Lab podcast here today. As always, like, subscribe, and continue the conversations that we're having today. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Healthy Business Lab podcast. Make sure you subscribe to keep up to date with all the latest episodes.